When you're first starting out as an event photographer, it can be a bit overwhelming juggling everything in your head. From technical aspects of the job to how you manage your client to just making sure you get good coverage of an event. There's a lot you're juggling. And so what I wanted to do for you beginner photographers, but also you more advanced photographers, is create a checklist that you can follow on every job. I've broken down this checklist into 3 days: the day before, day of, and the day after a job. Day 1 will cover how to properly prepare for the job, including preparing your gear, but also what information you should get from your client, to the day of, which will cover what type of shots you want to get, etc. And then the day after or the week after, depending on how fast you work, etc. That will cover how to manage your relationship with your client, how to properly export your files, tag them, etc. I will make this document free to everyone. Big deal. I'm not bragging about that, but I'm going to make the document available to you so you can print it out or you can edit it on your own on Google Drive. Also, I want to note that even if you're a more advanced photographer like myself, you often will forget to do certain things like adding your client to your mailing list, etc. So having this checklist is always a good idea to have. You can always go right through it, make sure you didn't miss anything. So let's jump right into it, starting with day 1. So one thing to keep in mind is this is a generic checklist that should apply to most jobs. If you really like this content or the idea of this checklist, let me know and I can make specific checklists for specific types of jobs. But for this one, let's start with the first thing to do the day before or the week before an event, and that would be to research your client. If it's a corporate client, you can check out their website, check out what their culture looks like, how formal their event might be, although you should always ask about attire. It can also tell you about the type of images that they like to use in their marketing, their website, etc. That's always a good idea to know. Next, you want to get a copy of the program. Now, depending on the client, they may provide this to you. Sometimes they have a professional organizer or they have someone in-house and that is their job to put on these events and they're very thorough. Sometimes they're not, or maybe they just trust you to kind of know the lay of the land if you're an experienced photographer and that's why they're hiring you, and they don't give you everything you might need. So it's always a good idea to do the research or ask for a program and just get an idea of what the series of events will be. Also, you'll get a good idea if there is a program, if there's any photographs in it, you'll also know what they use year to year from previous photographers. Next, let's talk about gear. The first thing you need to do is select your equipment. Now, when it comes to camera bodies, because this is a generic checklist, I always recommend just having your primary camera and your secondary camera. It is important to have a backup, but I didn't come from money when I started my business. I had nothing, and I understand a lot of you will only have one camera body. Don't let people discourage you and don't let people tell you it's not professional to shoot with one body. Just do it until you can afford a second one. As soon as you can, get one. Even if it's a Rebel, it could be a good idea just to have something. It's more about the lenses anyway. Next, let's talk about selecting lenses. Again, it's a generic checklist, and so we're just gonna go with selecting a wide, a medium, and a telephoto. This could be something like a 17-40 for your wide, a 24-70 for your medium, and a 70-200 for your telephoto. But if you like to work with primes, I don't think it's the end-all be-all kind of thing for events, but I like shooting with primes, so you could do a prime lens equivalent. Just make sure you have all focal lengths covered. When it comes to selecting a flash, you're usually just selecting your flash. But again, you should have a backup of your flash. I personally have my 600 EX2 RT. I believe it's Canon's current flagship model. And then for my backup, I have an old 430 EX. I do use it occasionally. It's pretty reliable. It's oddly reliable, actually. I've owned a few flashes and it's one of the most reliable I've had. But I always bring a backup of a flash. Next, let's give our gear a once over. Make sure all the electronics are working and make sure that the lenses are clean. So after we've done that, we've cleaned everything, everything's working, it's time to make sure we have fresh batteries and fully charged batteries. When it comes to my flash, I usually use rechargeable batteries because I would end up spending a fortune otherwise in batteries. But for really important jobs, and I know I'm going to be using my flash a lot, I often actually just put in fresh, new AA batteries rather than use the rechargeable, because sometimes those rechargeable batteries aren't as reliable. Next, we want to make sure our camera batteries are fully charged. I would recommend doing this more than a day before the event because you don't want to charge them overnight, because you might forget to put them in your bag, and the whole point of the checklist is to have everything done the night before. So I would recommend a day before charging your batteries all the way, and then check them off as you add them to your camera bag. So the last thing I want to talk about is bringing something fun. Now, bringing something fun is a way you can stay engaged with your craft and challenge yourself. I like to use film cameras or a vintage lens that I have to manually focus, that kind of thing. But if you're just starting out, I do not recommend adding an extra challenge. You've got enough on your plate. The whole point of this checklist for the new photographer is to make sure that you're less overwhelmed and you're more prepared and that everything's in order. Adding a new challenge is not a good idea until you need that new challenge. The last thing you want to do in preparation of your event is to research how long it will take you to get there. I always check out Google Maps. I make sure to put when I need to arrive by and from where I'm leaving, and then I double my time. I'd always rather get there early than on time or late. And if I get there really early, sometimes a full hour early, that's okay. I can use that time to scout. I can grab a coffee. I also just like arriving to a job, not feeling like I have to go right away. Because once I'm ready to shoot, I'm just shooting, and it's pretty fast paced. So a little bonus tip: get there early. You can set your intentions, think about what you want to achieve at the job, and then when it's time for the job, you're ready to go, mentally and in every other aspect, because you used my checklist. So I was going to talk about the day of the event in a different location, but my dog planted himself on me and now I can't move. So what we're going to do is talk about it from here. So I broke up the day of the event into 3 sections. The first one would be what to do about the venue. The first thing you want to do is find a nice location you can stow your gear. This can be a corner, it could be a special room. You can ask your client if there's a recommended place to leave your gear. If there's something like a DJ or a sound booth, that's always a good idea, a good space to put your bag at, as long as it's not in the way, because you know someone will be there all night and be able to keep an eye on it. I also recommend making friends with the people working that sound booth or the DJ, so they're on your side and they're going to kind of want to keep an eye out for you without you even asking. Next, we want to scout the location. Just get a lay of the land. I don't recommend scouting the day before or the week before, because if it's an inside venue, they likely did not set up any additional lightings yet. If it's an outdoor venue, the lighting at 9 a.m. will be completely different by 12 p.m. And so there really isn't a point in scouting that far ahead. What I recommend is just showing up early, as we discussed, and then having all the time in the world you need to scout as you are preparing to shoot the job. Next, we're going to talk to whoever's in charge of the venue and ask if there's any venue-specific rules, any protocols or rules to follow. After you've done that, it's always a good idea to identify your escape routes. You never know. And now we can move on to what to do with your client when you first see them at the event. First, ask them if there's any specific shots they want if you haven't already over email. Often you do, but it's always a good idea to kind of recap it in person. Often, most times, you have not met that person before, and it's a good idea to just go over everything a little bit. Next, you want to ask the client if there are any specific shots they want or VIPs they want you to cover. There often are. If your event is going to have speakers on stage, it's a given. You know who those VIPs are, but often they'll tell you who those VIPs are in advance, because you will have other opportunities like a cocktail hour to capture them, or maybe the step and repeat. When I shoot step and repeats, I often have sort of a liaison from the organization that's kind of there with me and letting me know who's important and that kind of thing. So that's a good idea. You can ask if there is someone like that available. And now we can move on to shot types, which are always a lot of fun. I've already made a video on shot types, but let's go through them quickly. And if you want a more comprehensive breakdown of what each of these shot types are and what they entail, that kind of thing, I do recommend checking out that video. So the first one will be your establishing shot. So establishing shots are your wide shots of a venue or a location. And in photography, it's not so much about, hey, I'm establishing where this is taking place. It's also about scale, and you're showing how large the event is. And even though your big close-up, blurred out background moments might be your favorite shots, often what they're using in pamphlets and that kind of thing will be those wide establishing shots. So that's an important one. Next, we have your candid interactions. Candid interactions are shots of people interacting naturally. It can be a shot over someone's shoulder, a shot where you have two talking heads, a shot where you kind of have both people in focus and there isn't necessarily one person who is your subject matter. They're really about just showing that a person is interacting off another person, and so you can, like I said, shoot over a shoulder, shoot between someone's arm, anything that shows that that person is interacting off of a person. Next, we have what I like to call these like close candids. These are kind of what I'm known for, I think, when you look at my work. It's those close-up shots where you get the largest emotional reactions that you can get at an event. That's what I'm always scanning the room for, looking for those big moments with the telephoto lens usually, and then grabbing those shots. Those are the shots that remind people what it was like to be there at an emotional level. Those are the shots that really give people that weren't there a sense of what it was like to be there emotionally. Next, we have group shots. Group shots are anytime you see a small group of people or a large group of people and you ask to get a posed shot of them. This could be at a cocktail hour when you see groups of two people talking or more. You just approach them. You say, hey, mind if I get a shot of you guys? And you grab those shots. These should be shot, I'm not going to get too technical, but they should be shot with an appropriate depth of field in which everyone is in focus. In the video I mentioned, I do talk about good rule of thumb apertures to use. Next, we can talk about the posed shot. A posed shot or a creative shot, a creative portrait, whatever you want to call it. Shots of individuals where they're maybe posing for you. Often you'll have to do at corporate events, impromptu LinkedIn profile pictures, that kind of thing. And so being a versatile photographer and being able to get those is a good idea. For me, I shoot these mostly for myself because often the work doesn't demand it. Any VIP or celebrity, I like to get a creative posed portrait of that person. It goes back to liking to challenge myself and keep things interesting. Lastly, we have detail shots, which are my least favorite to do, but they are important. You have to remember a lot of work goes into an event. A lot of thought and care goes into selecting those details, and they are important, and it is important to get. And as a bonus, the detail shots are a good way to market because you can build a relationship with the person that maybe put all of those centerpieces together. They might want photos, so you can network with that person, and that can help you down the line. Okay, let's talk post-event. The first thing after importing my files into Lightroom is I like to tag all of the work. I first will tag the type of job it was. So was it a corporate event? Corporate event. Portrait session, street photography. Next, I'll tag the location that the job was shot at. I'll tag my client name, the company name, and then any VIPs that were in attendance. Don't limit yourself. You can add to this checklist any other thing you want to add to it would be okay. Anything you can think of that you might want to be able to sort your photos by later on or search for will be really helpful to you. You guys will notice I'm not including an editing workflow in this checklist because that's going to be independent to you. I think everyone can figure out their own workflow that works for them. But there are specific things that you do want to make sure you do. And one of those would be to properly not just tag your descriptions, but tag for what those images might end up being used for. For example, tag for your blog or tag for your portfolio, tag for anything you might need them for. For me, sometimes I do job reviews on YouTube, and so I have a tag for job reviews. So these might not be my best shots, but just a shot I feel is representative of the body of work I shot kind of thing. But just that's going to be up to you what tags you want to use. You have colored coded tags, you have pick or non-pick or mark for reject. whatever you want to use, make up your own system. Down the line, if you guys are interested in it, I will share in more detail what I do, but I don't think I'm doing anything special, but I would be happy to do that if people thought it would be helpful. I always export to 2 folders starting out. One will be my high-res files, which will go into an online gallery, and then my client can download all of them. And then whether they request it or not, I always do a social media sized gallery, and that will be a secondary gallery I will provide to my client. Maybe as a bonus, I won't mention it, and then I'll just surprise them with it to make it easy for them. But usually I'm asking, hey, do you think this would be useful, or do you have someone that can resize for you? Most cases, they will say, yeah, please do that. That will save us a lot of time. Some clients will be like, no, it's not necessary, just the full res. It depends on the client, of course. Next, after that, I do one more export, and that is I will take all of the files I know I will use for my own social media, and I export it into a third folder, which is actually a Google Drive folder. I do that so that I can then download from Google Drive to my phone, and then I use a app that lets me post in the original aspect ratio, which is probably a lot of work and probably why I don't post to social media very often, but you should do it. Last, we can talk about marketing, and this is a basic checklist, and I'm sure there's more things that we could add to it, but the most important to me would be to add your client to your MailChimp or something like it, mailing list. You want to add it to them. MailChimp lets you tag, so you could say corporate client, or you can say like whatever, however you want to tag it, and then you can send out specific email blasts to those target clients. You don't want to go every 6 months and then be like, oh, who did I work for in the last 6 months, and what was their email, and then have to search. So having this as part of your checklist will save you a lot of time down the road. And there you have it, my event photography checklist. It was a generic one for most events. If you guys really liked it, let me know, because I can make more checklists for specific types of job, and they can be more thorough potentially. If you want to help support this channel, please like, subscribe, click the bell icon. All of it really does help me. But the way I really would love for you to help me is for you to share this content with someone you know it would help. Any new photographer starting out, or someone that you think would benefit from this content. I don't create mass appeal type of content. I don't talk about new cameras. I talk about stuff that I know will help people. And unfortunately, those people are the hardest to reach on YouTube. So any way you can help me with the algorithm or in person by sending it along would be greatly appreciated. Thank you guys. I will see you in the next video.